My overnight bag was already packed beside the front door when Daniel called. "Dad, don't leave yet." I looked at the clock above the kitchen doorway. I had planned to be on the road within 15 minutes. What happened? There was a pause long enough to make me straighten. "We had to change some things for the weekend. It's probably better if you don't come." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. The family anniversary weekend had been planned for weeks. Daniel had confirmed the dates with me twice. I had even bought a new shirt because he said the restaurant on Saturday night was nicer than the places I usually went. "Better for who?" I asked. He sighed. "Dad, please. The house is crowded. Claire's family brought more people than we expected, and the sleeping arrangements are a mess. I booked the motel you sent me." Another pause. "I know. It's not just the room." I rested one hand on the handle of my suitcase. "Then what is it?" "Nothing dramatic. I just think this weekend will go smoother if we keep things simple." That answer told me less than the first one had. I could have pushed. 20 years working construction had taught me that when somebody gave 3 explanations for one problem, at least 2 of them were usually covering the real one. But Daniel was my son, not a subcontractor, and I had spent most of my life believing family deserved a little more patience than business. "All right," I said, "if that's what you want." His relief came too quickly. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand." The call ended. I stood in the entryway looking at the bag I had packed the night before. My shaving kit was inside. 2 shirts. A framed photograph of Daniel's mother that I had planned to bring because the anniversary gathering included people who had known her. I carried the bag back to my bedroom, but did not unpack it. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Emma, my 14-year-old granddaughter. "Grandpa, are you okay?" I typed back that I was fine. Her reply came almost immediately. "Dad said you decided not to come. I thought you were excited." I read the message twice. Then a third time. Daniel had not told them plans had changed. He had not said the house was crowded or that the weekend would be easier without me. He had told them I chose this. I sat down at the kitchen table. My first impulse was to call him again. Instead, I looked at Emma's message and forced myself to slow down. There were now 2 versions of the same event, and only one of them belonged to me. I typed one question. "Who told you I wasn't coming?" Emma answered a minute later. "Dad did. Aunt Melissa asked at breakfast if you were driving up today, and Dad said you changed your mind and wanted to stay home." I stared at the screen. That was different from saying there was no room. Different from saying the weekend would be simpler without me. Daniel had given the family a decision I had never made. I thanked Emma and told her not to worry about it. Then I opened the message thread between Daniel and me. I wasn't looking for ammunition. I wanted to know whether I had missed something. Since my wife died, I had become careful about that. Grief can make a man certain he remembers a conversation correctly when what he really remembers is how it felt. For 37 years, I had worked as a contractor. Most disputes on a job site began with somebody saying, "That's not what we agreed." I learned early that memory was useful, but dates, measurements, and written confirmations were better. So I checked. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel had sent me the motel information himself. "Booked yours yet?" I had replied with the confirmation. "All set. Friday through Sunday." His answer was still there. "Perfect. Emma will be happy." Nothing suggested uncertainty. I kept scrolling. 5 days before the weekend, Daniel had sent the restaurant time for Saturday. 3 days later, Claire had asked in the family group chat whether anyone had dietary restrictions. I had answered that I would eat whatever they put in front of me. Nobody had told me not to come. Then I noticed something small. The restaurant time had changed. Daniel's first message said 7. A later family message said 6:30. That meant nothing by itself, but the later message included a revised head count. I counted the names. Mine wasn't there. The message had been sent the day before. Daniel called me. I put the phone down. That still didn't tell me why. It didn't even prove Daniel had deliberately removed me. Plans change. Lists get copied incorrectly. People make mistakes. But it did tell me the explanation he gave me didn't fit neatly with the sequence. I called him. He answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, I'm in the middle of something. I'll keep it short. Why did you tell Emma I decided not to come?" Silence. Then, "That's basically what happened." "No. You told me not to come. You agreed. After you told me it would be better if I stayed home." He exhaled sharply. "You're turning this into something it isn't. I'm asking you one question, and I'm telling you it's a misunderstanding." I looked toward the hallway. My suitcase was still sitting just inside my bedroom door. "If you handled it badly," I said, "just tell me that. We don't need to make it bigger." There was another pause. I had given him an easy way out, and I knew he understood it. Instead, he said, "Dad, everybody's already here. They're having a good time. Please don't start calling people and making this into family drama." "I haven't called anybody." "Good. Then don't." The words landed harder than I expected. Not because he sounded angry, because he sounded worried. "Daniel, why would asking what happened embarrass anyone?" "It won't, unless you make it embarrassing." I said nothing. He lowered his voice. "There's no reason to embarrass anybody now. Just let everyone enjoy the weekend." After we hung up, I remained at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand. I still didn't know why Daniel wanted me absent, but I knew something else now. He wasn't asking me to understand a change of plans. He was asking me to protect a version of events that had never happened. That was the part one couldn't ignore. If Daniel had simply made a selfish decision, there was nothing left to investigate. He had asked me not to come. I had agreed not to force myself into a gathering where I wasn't wanted, and eventually we would have dealt with the damage between us. But he had created a different story for everyone else. The next morning, I went back through the messages more carefully. The revised restaurant head count had been posted Thursday afternoon. Daniel hadn't called me until Friday morning. I checked the motel confirmation next. My reservation was still active because I had made it myself, but an earlier message from Daniel contained the original weekend schedule. Comparing it with the revised family schedule showed that several arrangements had been changed before I knew anything was wrong. None of that proved why. It did prove the timeline mattered. I called my sister Melissa. "I'm not trying to drag you into anything," I told her. "I just need to check something. When did you first hear I wasn't coming?" She hesitated. "I don't know exactly. Before Friday morning?" Another pause. "I think so. What were you told?" "Robert, maybe you should talk to Daniel." "I have." That answer seemed to make her more uncomfortable. Finally, she said, "He mentioned earlier in the week that you probably weren't going to make it." I leaned back in my chair. "Earlier in the week?" "Yes." "Did he say why?" "Not really. I assumed you had something else going on." I thanked her and ended the call before she felt she had to defend either of us. Now the sequence was harder to dismiss. Daniel had been preparing people for my absence before he ever told me I was unwanted. I still didn't know whether that meant he had planned it from the beginning or whether something had happened during the week. I certainly didn't know why, so I called him once more. "Melissa says you were telling people earlier this week that I probably wasn't coming." His tone changed immediately. "You called Melissa?" I asked when she first heard I wasn't coming. "This is exactly what I asked you not to do. And I'm asking you again to tell me what happened. You're interrogating everybody over a weekend." "No, I'm asking you." He went quiet. I gave him another chance. "If there's something you didn't want to tell me now. We can keep this between us." "You need to stop." "Why?" "Because you're making yourself look worse." That sentence stayed with me. Later that afternoon, my cousin Mark called. We weren't especially close, which made the call more surprising. "Robert, I don't want to get involved," he said. "But Daniel says you're upset and calling people about the trip." I asked Melissa one question. "Well, maybe let Daniel have his weekend. You can sort it out afterward." I understood then what was happening. Daniel's version wasn't only explaining why I was absent anymore. It was beginning to explain why I was asking questions. I was becoming the difficult one. That evening, Emma sent me a photograph from the gathering. She was standing near a long table with relatives behind her, smiling. But her message underneath was simple. "Wish you were here." I almost typed the truth. Instead, I wrote, "Me too. Have fun with everyone." Whatever Daniel and I were doing to each other, I wasn't going to make his daughter carry it. A few minutes later, Melissa called again. Her voice was quieter this time. "Robert, there's something I didn't tell you earlier." I waited. "I remember Daniel talking about changing the arrangements before any of us thought you weren't coming." I looked at the dates on my screen. For the first time, someone else's memory matched the timeline. And for the first time, I understood that staying silent wasn't keeping the peace anymore. It was helping Daniel's story become the truth. Melissa's words changed the problem. Until then, I could still tell myself Daniel had made a bad decision under pressure and covered it with a convenient explanation. But if he had discussed changing the arrangements before anyone believed I was staying home, then my absence wasn't an accident he had handled badly afterward. I spent Saturday morning putting the sequence on paper. Not accusations. Dates. Daniel sent the motel information. I confirmed my reservation. He sent the restaurant time. The family schedule changed. The revised head count appeared without my name. Only afterward did he call and tell me not to come. Seeing it in order made the contradiction harder to explain away. It also made me angry. That was when another message arrived from Mark. He said he hoped I wasn't taking things personally, and added that Daniel had mentioned I'd been a little difficult lately. I read that phrase several times. Difficult. By lunchtime, Melissa called again. She sounded embarrassed. I probably shouldn't repeat this. Then don't if you don't want to. She sighed. Daniel told people you can get uncomfortable around groups you don't know. He made it sound like you might not enjoy being there anyway. I stood at the kitchen counter, looking through the window over the sink. I had met Claire's parents before. We weren't close, but I had never caused trouble around them. Did he say I asked not to come? Not exactly. More like it was probably better for everyone. There it was again. Better. Daniel was no longer just explaining an empty chair. He was building an explanation for why that chair should have been empty. For a few minutes, I considered opening the family group chat and posting the messages myself. One screenshot could have ended part of the argument. I didn't do it. Years of working with crews had taught me something else about disputes. If you lead with anger, people remember the anger and forget the measurements. So I reduced everything to a simple timeline. What had been agreed? What changed? When it changed? When I was told? I sent nothing. That afternoon, Melissa asked me to forward the revised restaurant message because she wanted to check something. A few minutes later she called. Robert, this was Thursday. Yes. But Daniel told us Friday that you decided not to come. Yes. She became quiet. It was the first time I heard doubt replace sympathy in someone else's voice. Not sympathy for me. Doubt about him. Emma texted later. Are you mad at Dad? I stared at the question longer than I had stared at any timestamp. I could have answered honestly in a way that would have hurt Daniel immediately. Emma loved me. If I told her her father had lied about me, she would carry that knowledge through the rest of the weekend. That wasn't her job. Your dad and I disagree about something, I wrote. We'll handle it. You never have to choose between us. She sent back a heart. That small response did more to settle me than anything else had. Near evening, Melissa called for the third time. I've been thinking about what you asked. I waited. I remember something from before the weekend. Daniel was talking about changing the arrangements before any of us thought you weren't coming. Talking to who? She hesitated. I don't want to be put in the middle. I won't put you there. I mean it, Robert. So do I. She took a breath. I just think you should know you're not imagining the timing. After we hung up, I looked at the paper on my table. I had confirmation that Daniel's story didn't fit the sequence. What I still didn't have was the answer that mattered most. Why had my son decided I needed to disappear from the weekend before he ever told me I wasn't welcome? That question stayed with me through the night. By Sunday morning, I wasn't interested in proving Daniel wrong just for the satisfaction of it. The timeline had already answered one question. My absence had been discussed before I was told not to come. What I needed to understand was why. Melissa finally agreed to talk without rushing. I don't want this turning into me testifying against your son, she said. It won't. She hesitated before telling me that Daniel had mentioned changing the weekend arrangements several days earlier. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. He had talked about keeping things comfortable and making sure the weekend went smoothly. Did he mention me? Not at first. And later. Another hesitation. He said Claire's family had certain expectations. That phrase bothered me because I had heard versions of it before. Small things came back to me. Daniel suggesting I wear something nicer when Claire's parents came to dinner. Daniel interrupting when I told a story about an old construction job. Once, after I mentioned how tight money had been during his childhood, he quietly asked me not to bring up that kind of stuff around Claire's relatives. I had treated those moments as a son's fussiness. Now they looked different. Still, I refused to make motive out of memories alone. Did Daniel actually say he didn't want me there because of Claire's family? No, that mattered. Then I won't say he did. Melissa was quiet for a moment. He did say he wanted the weekend to make a good impression, and he worried you might say something that made things awkward. Something like what? He didn't say. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. I was a retired contractor. I lived in the same modest house where Daniel had grown up. I still drove a pickup with a dent in the rear bumper because the dent didn't prevent it from starting. Since my wife died, I had stopped pretending I enjoyed crowded rooms more than I actually did. None of those things made me ashamed. Apparently, Daniel had started feeling ashamed for me, or perhaps ashamed of me. I called him that afternoon. This time I didn't ask why I had been excluded. I want you to correct what you told everyone. His answer came quickly. Correct what? That I decided not to come. Dad, we're still doing this. Yes. You're proving my point. What point? That this weekend would have been uncomfortable. I let that sit between us. I don't want an invitation anymore, Daniel. I don't want anybody making room for me. I want you to tell them I didn't cancel. You really want me to interrupt the whole weekend and announce that? No. Tell the people you told. For what? So everyone can decide I'm a terrible son. This isn't about what they decide. It's about what happened. His voice hardened. You have no idea how much pressure I've been under trying to make this weekend work. Then tell me. I shouldn't have to explain every decision to you. No. But if you make a decision for me, then tell everyone it was mine. You do. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said quietly, if you bring this up in front of everyone, Dad, they're going to understand exactly why I thought it was better if you weren't here. The words were meant as a warning. Instead, they answered more than he realized. I looked at the handwritten timeline on my kitchen table. Until that moment, part of me had still wanted the original weekend back. The dinner, the photographs, Emma running over when I arrived. I didn't anymore. Being included wasn't the issue. My son had decided that the easiest way to create the family picture he wanted was to remove me from it, then tell everyone I had stepped out of the frame myself. I couldn't undo that decision, but I could stop carrying the lie for him. Daniel didn't wait for me to decide what to do next. Monday morning, Melissa called before I had finished my coffee. I think you should know what he's saying. I closed my eyes. What now? He told Mark and a few others that you're angry about the weekend and going through old messages trying to prove he did something to you. That description was close enough to the truth to be useful to him. I had gone through messages. I had written down dates. I had asked questions. Daniel had simply removed the reason. Without the reason, I didn't look like a father trying to understand why his son had lied about him. I looked like an old man building a case because he couldn't accept being left out of one weekend. He says you won't let it go, Melissa added. I suppose he's right about that part. Robert, I'm not angry with you. After we hung up, Mark sent me a message. Maybe give this some space. Digging through texts isn't helping. I didn't answer. 2 days earlier, Mark had sounded uncertain about Daniel's version. Now he was backing away from me again. That was Daniel's first real victory. He hadn't disproved anything I found. He had made the fact that I was looking seem like the problem. By afternoon, another relative asked whether I was planning to confront Daniel in front of Claire's family. I wasn't. But apparently that possibility was already circulating. For the first time since the call beside my packed suitcase, I wondered whether silence might actually be easier. Then Emma called. Her voice was cautious. Grandpa, is everyone fighting because of me? The question stopped me. No, but I asked why you weren't there. You didn't cause anything. Dad said people are making a big deal out of something that was already settled. I could have ended Daniel's advantage in 30 seconds. I had the messages in front of me. I could have told Emma exactly when her father changed the arrangements. I could have explained what Melissa remembered. Emma trusted me. Once she knew, Daniel would have to answer to his own daughter. Instead, I pushed the papers away. This is between your dad and me. So he's right. I didn't. Say that. Then who's right? You don't have to decide. She was quiet. I hate this. I know. I don't want you mad at him. Then don't carry that either. After we ended the call, I understood what restraint was going to cost me. Daniel could use my silence with Emma as space for his version to survive. I was going to let him have that space. Not because he deserved it. Because she did. That evening, Daniel posted a message in the family group chat. He didn't name me directly at first. He thanked everyone for a good weekend, then apologized for the unnecessary confusion afterward. A few messages later, when Melissa asked what he meant, he answered plainly. Dad originally chose not to come. He got upset afterward and started questioning how everything was handled. I don't want this becoming bigger than it is. There it was. Public now. Not a misunderstanding between father and son. A statement everyone could read. I watched relatives respond with cautious hearts, short assurances, and silence. Daniel had taken the story that excluded me and reinforced it in front of the same people who had believed it the first time. Then my phone rang. Melissa. I saw it, I said. So did I. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, he shouldn't have written that. No, I didn't want to get between you two. I know. But I remember that conversation, Robert. He was talking about changing the arrangements before you supposedly decided anything. I looked at Daniel's message again. Are you sure? Yes. This time there was no hesitation. If he keeps saying otherwise, Melissa said, I'll tell them when he talked about it. Daniel had gotten what he wanted for the moment. To everyone watching, I was still the father who had changed his mind, regretted it, and started digging through old messages afterward. My position had never looked worse. But for the first time, the person who could independently break his timeline was willing to speak. Melissa's offer changed what I had, but it didn't change what I wanted. I wasn't trying to destroy Daniel's standing in the family. I wanted one false statement corrected. So I gathered only what belonged to that. Question. The first message was Daniel sending me the motel information and confirming I was expected. The second was my reservation confirmation. Then came the revised restaurant head count without my name, posted before Daniel ever called to tell me not to come. Finally, there was his explanation to the family that I had chosen to stay home. Melissa's memory supplied the piece the messages couldn't. Daniel had discussed changing the arrangements before anyone believed I had withdrawn. I left everything else alone. There were old messages I could have used to make Daniel look petty. Comments about my clothes. Times he had corrected me around Claire's family. Remarks that now carried a meaning I hadn't noticed when they were made. They weren't necessary. The lie was enough. I called Daniel that evening. I want to give you one more chance to fix this yourself. He laughed once, without humor. Fix what, Dad? The message you posted. I told them what happened. No. You told them I chose not to come. You agreed to stay home. After you told me not to come. We're arguing over wording now. We're arguing over whose decision you told everyone it was. He went silent. I kept my voice level. Tell them the truth. Say you changed the arrangements and asked me not to attend. That's all I'm asking. And then what? Everybody spends the next month judging me. That part isn't mine to control. His voice tightened. You're my father. Sometimes family takes a little embarrassment instead of making everything public. I almost answered immediately. Then I realized what he had actually asked me to do. He wanted me to absorb the embarrassment created by his decision so he wouldn't have to absorb the embarrassment of admitting it. Daniel, I've been doing that since Friday. Doing what? Carrying your version. He exhaled. Nobody is going to believe this the way you think they will. You start showing people timestamps and messages. You're just going to prove what I've been saying, that you can't let anything go. For a moment, I pictured Emma hearing all of it. I could still send her the messages. I could let her ask the questions I was asking. Nothing would. Frightened Daniel more than having his daughter look at him differently. I knew that, and I knew I wouldn't do it. Whatever happened next, Emma would not be my leverage. I won't involve her, I said. He knew immediately who I meant. Good, but I won't lie for you either. His tone cooled. Then do whatever you think you need to do. After the call, I arranged the 4 pieces of the timeline on my table. No speeches. No old grievances. No attempt to prove Daniel had always been a bad son, because I didn't believe that was true. Just what had happened. The next family gathering was already being discussed in the group chat. A smaller dinner where several of the same relatives would be present. Daniel was acting as if the weekend dispute had been settled. I decided that if he repeated the story there, I would correct it there. The lie had become public. The correction would have to be public too. Before I put my phone away, I sent Daniel one final message. You can correct it before then. If you do, I won't add anything. He read it. No answer came. For days, I had wondered whether proving the truth would cost me my relationship with my son. Now I understood the choice more clearly. I could preserve the appearance of peace by accepting a lie about myself, or I could risk that peace without turning the truth into revenge. Daniel seemed certain that when the moment came, the family would believe him. Maybe they would. But this time, I wouldn't be asking anyone to choose between 2 memories. I would ask them to look at the order in which things actually happened. The dinner was 4 nights later at Melissa's house. I arrived 10 minutes early. Daniel was already there with Claire. He looked at me once when I walked in, then turned back to Mark as if nothing between us required attention. I didn't bring printed pages or a folder. Everything I needed was on my phone. For almost an hour, nobody mentioned the weekend. I didn't either. Then Mark made an awkward joke about how at least the next family gathering might be easier to organize. Daniel smiled. Assuming Dad doesn't change his mind afterward. The room went quiet. I looked at him. You still want to say that's? What happened? His smile disappeared. Dad, don't. I'm asking one question. Claire shifted beside him. Melissa remained near the kitchen doorway. Daniel shook his head. You decided not to come. Then you got upset about how things were handled. When did I decide that? Friday. Before or after you called me? He frowned. During the call. We talked about it. You told me it would be better if I didn't come. And you agreed. I took out my phone. On Thursday afternoon, the restaurant head count was changed. My name was already gone. Daniel's expression tightened. That doesn't mean anything. We were adjusting numbers all week. That could be true. I opened the earlier message. 2 weeks before that, you sent me the motel information. I booked it. You replied, perfect. Emma will be happy. Nobody spoke. I showed the next timestamp. Thursday, the head count changed. Friday morning, you called me. Later, you told everyone I decided not to come. Daniel leaned back. You've seriously built a timeline for this? Yes. He looked around the table, almost relieved. This is what I've been trying to explain. He can't let it go. A week earlier, that argument might have worked. This time Melissa spoke. Daniel, when did you first start talking about changing the arrangements? He looked at her. What? You talked to me before Friday. I talked to everybody about arrangements. You talked about your dad not being there. Daniel's face changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. Melissa continued. At the time, I thought Robert had already said he wasn't coming. That's why I didn't question it. But he hadn't. Daniel looked at me. So now you've got Melissa involved. I didn't ask her to take my side. You called her. I asked when she first heard I wasn't coming. Claire finally spoke. Daniel, did you know before Friday that Robert wasn't going to be there? He rubbed one hand across his forehead. I knew there were problems with the weekend. That isn't what she asked, Mark said. The balance in the room shifted with that sentence. Not dramatically. Nobody shouted. People simply stopped helping Daniel explain. I put my phone down. I don't need anyone to decide whether I'm difficult. I don't need an apology in front of the room. I want one answer. Daniel stared at me. Why did everyone need to believe I chose not to come? He looked toward Claire, then away. For several seconds, I thought he would refuse. Finally, he said, because I was trying to keep the weekend comfortable. For whom? Claire's family was there. There were people you barely knew. I've been around them before. I know. Then what were you worried I'd do? His jaw tightened. Dad, you say things. What things? You talk about money, old jobs, how things used to be. You tell stories people don't need to hear. I understood. Not all at once, because some part of me still wanted a better explanation. But there wasn't one. You were embarrassed by me. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Daniel looked around the table and seemed to realize that every defense he had left made the original decision clearer. I wanted one weekend where everything went smoothly, he said. I didn't want Claire's family thinking. He stopped. Thinking what? I asked. He couldn't finish it. He didn't need to. I nodded toward my phone. You could have told me that. It would have hurt, but at least it would have been yours. Instead, you told everyone the decision was mine. Daniel's shoulders dropped. Claire looked at him. Was it? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, no, nobody moved. Daniel swallowed. Dad didn't decide not to come. I asked him not to. That was all I had wanted him to say. I didn't show the old messages about my clothes. I didn't mention every time he had corrected me around Claire's family. I didn't ask anyone to punish him. I simply said, the people you told otherwise needed to hear that from you. Daniel nodded once. His face was red, but the embarrassment belonged where it should have belonged from the beginning, with the decision that created it. I picked up my phone and put it back in my pocket. For a week, Daniel had made my absence look like my choice and my questions look like proof that something was wrong with me. Now the family knew what had actually happened. I hadn't gotten the weekend back. I hadn't gotten my son's respect back either. But I had gotten my own decision back. I had wanted to go. He had wanted me gone. And at last, nobody in the room had to pretend those were the same thing. Daniel called me 2 days later. His apology began badly. He talked about the pressure of the weekend, about Claire's relatives, about how humiliating the dinner had been for him. For several minutes, most of what he regretted seemed to be what happened after his decision rather than the decision itself. I listened. When he finished, I said, I don't need you to feel worse, Daniel. I need you to understand what has to be different. I know I shouldn't have lied. That matters. But you also decided being embarrassed by me was more important than being honest with me. He didn't answer. I can forgive something without pretending it didn't change anything. So what happens now? I don't know yet. That was the truth. I wasn't interested in punishing my son, but I wasn't ready to restore trust because he had finally admitted what everyone else already knew. Over the next few weeks, Daniel stopped trying to explain the weekend away. He corrected the story with relatives who hadn't been at Melissa's dinner. When Mark mentioned it to me later, He didn't offer an apology on Daniel's behalf or tell me I should move on. He simply said, "He told me you never canceled." That was enough. Daniel also began calling without asking me to reassure him that everything between us was fine. Our conversations were shorter than before, sometimes awkward, but they were honest. I had my own part to consider too. For years, especially after my wife died, I had treated avoiding conflict as a form of kindness. When Daniel dismissed a remark or corrected me unnecessarily, I usually let it pass. When something hurt, I told myself keeping the family comfortable mattered more than making every injury visible. Maybe somewhere along the way, my silence had taught him that I would absorb almost anything. That didn't excuse what he did, but it explained why my refusal surprised him. Emma never learned the details from me. She knew her father and I had fought. She knew the weekend had not happened the way she had first been told. Beyond that, I let Daniel remain her father instead of turning him into evidence for my side. Our relationship didn't change. If anything, that mattered more to me than winning over every relative at Melissa's table. Several weeks later, I was standing in my entryway when Emma arrived for a short trip we'd planned together. She opened the door, saw my overnight bag sitting beside it, and smiled. "You're actually packed early. I've been known to surprise people." She rolled her eyes and grabbed the handle before I could. "I've got it." I watched her carry the bag toward the car. For a second, I remembered the same bag sitting in the same place on the morning Daniel called. Back then, I had been ready to go somewhere I believed I belonged, only to learn that someone else had already decided there wasn't room for me and needed everyone to believe leaving had been my idea. This time there was no revised head count, no explanation waiting for other people, no story I had to agree to just to keep things comfortable. Emma opened the trunk and waved at me impatiently. "Grandpa, are you coming?" I locked the front door and walked toward her. "Yes," I said. "I am." And this time, that decision was mine.